Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Joined today, he's an actor, performer, presenter, author, and entrepreneur. It's Tyler Foley. How are you doing today, Tyler?
Oh, I'm doing good. Alex, how are you?
Doing so good. We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what did you like doing growing up?
Oh, back to the beginning. I was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and growing up, I loved to perform. I was cooked on the stage at a very early age. I loved all kinds of performance too. Like I liked magic, I liked puppeteering, general stagecraft, like just acting in general. Um, even reciting poems, like you just name it. And then, all the other regular pursuits of any child growing up in the 80s. I played with my Transformers like they're going out of style. Lego was, a constant in my life. I had a real fascination with uh, hamsters. My dad got me hamsters when I was like 5, and those things breed like they're going out of style. So, to like one hamster became two hamsters became 3,000 hamsters. It was really crazy, but those were kind of my hobbies growing up and what I enjoyed.
Did you have the hamster in the ball that's just rolling around your house and
Oh yeah,
stuff?
yeah, yeah, and started to make the little mazes where they could like scurry up and around the wall, which my mom hated because she could hear them like, and I could hear them at night. Ironically, or yeah, I enjoyed. I found it calming. Like there was something about, knowing that they were around. But there did get to be a point where there was just too many of the things, and they're cannibals, so they would like eat their young, and
Oh, yeah.
that was sad. To be like, look, mommy had a litter, and then look, daddy ate them all. It was, yeah, it was educational.
You talked about a bunch of different performances, and one of those things was magicians. And growing up
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, I need to know how they do this, things like that. And then they came out with a show that literally tells all the secrets. And then I'm like, well, I guess I'm a magician now. But during those times you're looking at all these performances, was that always like, I want to be like that? But you talked about a lot of different styles. So was it hard to just pick one in a way?
Oh yeah, the great thing is when I was young, I didn't have to pick one.
Mhm.
I got to experiment with a lot of different things, and when I say puppetry, I mean like both puppetry and marionettes. I got to do them
Okay.
both. I actually really enjoyed marionettes. I remember like I must have been like 10 or 11, and my aunt Terry got me like these really, really complex marionettes that had multiple articulations. So you could move their arms, you could move their hands, you could move their legs, their hands, arms, and feet. And they had little actuators, so you could actually make them blink and talk. So I remember, and I was fascinated by Thunderbirds, the old marionation, like the original Thunderbirds from like 1960s. Absolutely was fascinated with that show. I used to try and recreate that. So yeah, I got into all kinds of different things. And the nice thing is I grew up, and of all those pursuits were very supported by
Mhm.
my so there wasn't anything that I couldn't want to get into that they didn't let me. And then my teachers were remarkably supportive too. So like, I grew up on stage in the fine arts, performing from a very young age. 6 years old, I started acting, and so I was able to explore all these both professionally and then as a hobby, and magic being the hobby one. I had magic kits, I think, when I started when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and then I had the joy in my professional life as I grew up to be involved with larger stage illusions, and being like a magician's assistant and stuff like that. So that was really cool.
I'm jealous. I'm just jealous of that. You talked about getting into the fine arts really early. As a kid getting into it, we hear nowadays where it could be sometimes cutthroat, everyone's looking out for themselves. Being a kid in that, how was that for you? Was everyone nice to each other? Was it all, like you mentioned, supportive and your family supporting you, but talk
Yeah.
about that from a performer side.
Yeah, so as a kid, nobody. nobody's mean to a kid. So it was really supportive. The meanest, I think the most negativity I ever experienced was in my early teens, and a director was really hard on me. And like deservedly so too. Like when I look back on it, I was slacking because I'd been doing it, like when I was 16, I'd been doing it for a decade. And this director demanded more of me. And I was kind of, what's wrong with my performance? I thought I was doing a good job. And he was like, no, you can do more and you can do better. And I expect more out of you. And it's weird too, to be in a leadership position at 16 amongst adults when you're like the 10-year vet, and some people only have 2 or 3 years under their belts in their early 20s, or they've gotten their BA of fine arts and they're like, I'm new and shiny. And I'm like, I'm old and jaded, and you're 10 years older than me. So that had a weird dynamic. But no, man, growing up, especially when I was younger, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, into my tweens, it was nothing but supportive. And I think a lot of this cutthroat comes from a misperception of Hollywood actors who get into the business young, and their parents are like real stage parents, where like, if you don't do this, we don't pay our mortgage. And you're like, oh, it shouldn't actually be that way. My daughter is 7 years old. We got her into film, and her first gig was at 11 months old.
Wow.
And she literally stepped away from it for 2 years. She was like, Daddy, I don't want to do it. And we're like, okay, kiddo, you don't do it. And then she was very clear. She was like, I don't want to do it until I can audition in person again. Because over,
Yeah.
the funny stuff over the last 2 years, all of the auditions were self-taped. And she's like, Daddy, I don't like playing in the basement. Right. And understandably so. Her big joy of going out and audition, my joy when I got to do it when I was younger, so I totally understood, is you get to go into the audition room. There's other kids there. The casting director takes you in. Parents aren't allowed. No, no, Daddy, you don't get to come in with me. I get to go with the casting director, and they go and they tape, and they get to play and just explore and be kids. And down here, it's Daddy's your reader, your casting director, producer, and the camera guy all at the same time. So that's not fun. And so she was like, I don't want to do it until we go in person. And sure enough, the first in-person audition she gets, yeah, I want to go. Okay. And does she book it? Absolutely, she does. So
Wow.
it's, I let her do her thing. And then immediately after that, my agent was like, woohoo, Kenzie's back. And then she sent her out for these 2 auditions, and they were both self-tapes. And she's like, I told you no. I said no. All right. So I had to like phone my agent and be like, I'm so sorry. Kenzie only wants to go to the in-person auditions. My agent's like, there are almost no in-person auditions still. All the casting directors like this stuff. And I'm like, sorry, how it is. So yeah, no, it was good for me because I grew up with that kind of support, where my mom would take me to auditions if I wanted to go. If I wasn't feeling like it, she didn't make me go. And I think the majority of the world is like that. Like, there are a lot of kids in the business. There are a lot of kids in theater. There's a lot of kids in film and television, and they're not strung out drug addicts on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard, you know? And I think that's actually a rarity. And a lot of it comes from pressures of having to be this provider for your family, or it's very rare again that you have performers who become instant superstars in their in childhood, and where you get a lot of pressure put on you. And so I can see where that might um push somebody in a direction. But for every Corey Haim, there's a Christian Bale,
Yeah.
right? And so, or you have people who've stepped away or who've not embraced it, like Haley Joel Osment. Like he's just doing him. So Ryan Reynolds, for crying out loud, was a child star. I mean, he started out really young. Ryan Gosling, and all these guys turned out just fine. So I think it gets skewed because of a couple of people who've gone off the rail, and a lot of that was more societal pressure as opposed to the business.
Especially you talked about where we only hear one side of the story, especially outsiders. We only hear the
Yeah,
negatives because that's all the media wants to play, and we don't really know the
yeah,
true story about it. But for you, someone that grew up doing in that lifestyle or that industry, you give a
yeah.
better interpretation of what really happens. And you gave a great example about what goes on because we only
Yeah.
hear the negatives. And I can admit that I only hear the negative stuff because I'm not in it.
Yeah. And see, for me, it was great. Like, let's list the positives. I got to explore completely, totally different people and lifestyles. I grew up in a very, very rural, very, very conservative
Yeah.
part of the country. And so, and yet the first wedding that I ever attended was a gay wedding. And that was before they were even legal in Canada or my province. So like that was to me, that was, you know, that was just a thing. Like there was nothing weird about it. I remember my uncle saying some funny stuff. You're like, "Oh, know about those. Oh, you know, what did he say? Going to be pretty lightweight loafers at that wedding," I think was exactly his quote. I was like, "Oh, hey, hey, easy pal. Those are my friends you're talking about." You know, but beyond that, like, yeah, I got to be exposed to different thoughts, different concepts, different ideas. I got to explore a lot of both sides. So I got a really well-rounded childhood, which was weird because it was very atypical of most people's childhoods. And a bonus, when you are a child performer, especially when you're unionized, they have to provide a tutor for you, and you're only allowed to work a certain number of hours and minutes and stuff. Like it's very controlled. So, you know, I struggled early on with school, particularly in my first and second grade. Like in the second grade, I was a C student at best. But then I started getting some of this private tutelage, and by the end of the year, I won an award for the most improved student in the second grade. And then in third grade beyond, I was straight A's, and none of that would have happened if it weren't for theater, because I was actually provided unbelievable one-on-one attention that you wouldn't get in the public system regularly.
Sometimes we're asked, what's that dream job of ours? What was the answer to that question for you growing up?
Oh, I mean, it morphed. When I was probably 5 to 7 or 8, pilot. I wanted to be a pilot for sure. And towards like the fifth and sixth grade, I got my first copy of Jaws, like the actual, um, not the movie, but the actual book. And I was in love with that story. And then I wanted to become a marine biologist. I wanted to, particularly if I could study sharks and all kinds, not just great whites, but like, you know, everything from little tiny reef sharks to hammerheads, tiger sharks. Like I was, you know, big whale sharks. You know, like I wanted to see them all. I wanted to study, and then you know, the other marine life too, dolphins, orcas, and then, you know, from there it just split off. I like the big ones. You know, I wasn't going to be finding Nemo, but I definitely wanted to, like, you know, study the really large, particularly aquatic mammals. Just was fascinated with that, and that was a thing for like, into high school. I remember grade 10, um, there was a seminar for students interested in marine biology that was put on by the University of British Columbia, and they were trying to get more inland participation because, like, I'm landlocked in where I grew up. I'm just north of Montana, so you don't have a lot of kids from Montana who are like, the ocean. We're usually like, I want to play with cattle, you know? And so it was rare, and they were trying to cultivate more interest in marine biology, particularly because it's not there's a misconception that marine biologists only work in the ocean. There's large freshwater lakes, there are rivers,
Yeah.
all of these have marine life, you know, and so they were trying to get more draw more into the program. And so I remember 10th grade going to that. My mom setting that up again. You know, you want to talk about an incredible human being who's supported by every whim and wish. You know, here I am. You know, I'm like, oh God, do I have to go to this audition? But man, I really want to study the fishes, mom. And she like hears that and gets me into that seminar. So I was doing that right up until probably 10th or 11th grade before I was like, no, screw it. I want to become a rock star.
When you were listing everything, I'm thinking, okay, he talks about his passion for acting in the film and all that industry, but not one mention was anything about wanting to be an actor. It just shows that you can have all these passionate items and you never know what you're going to like or what you're going to do until it's like the final shot clock down and you're like, okay, I got to make a decision. Where am I going to college and things like that. It just shows it's
Yeah,
amazing because marine biologist, actor, pilot, all three completely different
totally different.
areas.
Yeah. And ironically, in my late 20s, I ended up combining all of them into what was like the dream job for me. And that was um, running a business that specialized in aerial photography. So I got to play with the planes. I got to do a lot of performance in the aspect of I did a lot of lunch and learns and training sessions for clients to show them, closeout meetings and things like that. And so like it just kind of everything kind of blended and gelled. The only thing that I didn't get to do was a lot of bathymetric surveys, so I didn't get to do a lot of the marine stuff, but I got to get in a little bit of it. So
Hey, it's still young. You can get into that.
right, yeah, because I don't have it. I'm not wearing enough hats currently, Alex.
Well, before this, I read off your titles and you're like, is that all? We can add another one there perfectly.
Yeah. Oh man, I do. I am the definition of jack of all trades, master of none. Like, I do everything quite poorly.
But I don't even view that as a bad thing because I'm one of those people where if I don't know something, I'm going to learn how to do it because I don't want someone to do it for me unless I have to. I mean, if it's anything
Yeah.
science related, don't ask me for it because I ain't going to figure that out.
See, and I've kind of like 50-50. I'm fascinated with why things are the way they are. So I love to do the research, but there's a point where it gets so technical that I'm like, I just give me the broad strokes. Like I don't need to be an expert in it. And it's funny because my wife and my daughter are the exact opposite. They want to know and they want to know. And then when they know, they want to know that that they know. So it's like this deep intrinsic knowledge, and that to me is just, yeah, I'm in awe of them because I'm like, good on you, because that's not my forte. Like even you want to add one more thing. I love to drum. I love to play keyboards. I've always enjoyed music. I really loved music. I wasn't kidding. There was a point there in my late teens, I was in a band, and they were actually Juno nominated, which is like our version of the Grammys. And that was cool. That was fun. And I was like, hey, this music thing isn't too bad, but I am again mediocre at best. I can fill in. I can keep good meter and good time, but yeah, I am by no means a professional drummer. I know some really good guys. And what's worse, I'm Canadian, so greatest drummer ever lived is Canadian Neil Peart, and I'm not Neil. Rest his soul. So
Looking at your entire acting career, is there a job that you had that is memorable for you?
oh yeah, door to door. When I got to work with William H. Macy, Bill, and Dame Helen Mirren, the Dame Helen Mirren. That was like, when I look back on all of the jobs that I've had, and I've done some really cool things. A lot of people are like, "Hey, you were in Freddy versus Jason." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I have got a credit in Freddy versus Jason. You blink and miss me in Freddy versus Jason." But that's like the one that most people tend to gravitate to because, right, like I got to meet Robert Englund, and I really did get to interact with the character Freddy Krueger, which is super cool. But it the job satisfaction was kind of like it was a thing that I got to do, and it's cool on the resume. People ask about it a lot, but it was literally, for me, it was a job where the doing door to door with Bill and Helen. Um, it's the first time I felt like a movie star. I had normally, because I'm a day player, so like I come in, I say like 1, 2, 3 lines over the course of a day, 2, 3, 5. I had a really fun gig on a TV series called Jeremiah, where I got to work with the late Luke Perry and Malcolm Jamal Warner from the Cosby Show, and that was that was cool. And there was like, it was multiple weeks of
Mhm.
filming for me because I was in a couple episodes, and that was fun. But it's, again, I had like this tiny little trailer. They call it the honey wagon, and it's like this little tiny stick bank of stick dressing rooms that are smaller than prison cells, and then the toilets are with them too. So like,
Oh.
there's usually a wafting smell of sewage that comes through
Oh.
your dressing room, and you're like, smells like a teamster had a good lunch today, is usually what it feels like. And but when I did door to door, I had this double wide trailer, and it was the Star trailer. And so like, I had, not only did I have my own bathroom, my bathroom had a shower and a tub.
Oh.
And I had like, it had double bump outs, and I had like this big closet and like this eating nook area and like couches and like my own little kind of bedroom area that I could go and relax in. Not that I needed it. I was there for a day. Like, it was literally over the night. But hey, it was there. It was there if I wanted it. And I remember Bill coming in. Um, he's, for those who aren't familiar, Door to Door is about the real life story of Bill Porter, who was a door to door salesman with cerebral palsy. So, and then not only that, but it tracks the course of his life from like 1950 to 1990, give or take. So it's a 40-year span. So not only did Bill have to get into character makeup to give him a more physical appearance of Bill Porter, but he also had to age makeup, and um, he came in between makeup setups. So he was going from old Bill to young Bill. Kind of came in. He's like, hey, you're Tyler. How are you? And I'm like, I'm okay. He's like, yeah, no, I'm so glad you could do this. I'm like, me too. And he's like, hey, I heard you play drums. I'm like, yeah, where the did you hear that from? Like, you're William H. Macy, you're Fargo. Why are you talking to me? And he's like, yeah, I'm learning to play the guitar. Would it be cool if I came in and jammed with you? I was like,
Wow.
dude, man, this is your show. You come do whatever you want. So I got to jam with William H. Macy. I got to hang out with Helen Mirren on set. I had my like name on the back of the set chair. So I had my, and that's like, you never get that. And for me, like, I'm a day player. I had like 4 lines in that show, and name bar across the back. And then Helen Mirren was nominated that year for the Golden Globe for Door to Door. And when you know how they play the scene, the setup, they're like, and nominated for Door to Door, Helen Mirren. And then they play like the little teaser trailer. Uh, the scene that they played for that was the scene between me, her, and Bill in the diner.
Wow.
And so I'm like, oh, like, it was just, I've never felt more job satisfaction or felt more aligned with the universe or felt like I was in the right spot at the right time doing the right thing. Like, even to the point where I even remember the audition. I remember knowing when I walked out of the audition, and it's rare for an actor. When you walk out of an audition, you're usually like, oh, I could have totally done that different, or I should have made that choice. Or sometimes, like, even when you feel good about it, you're like, well, that was good. I hope I get it. I walked out of that door to door audition. I remember having to come back. My mom was actually in town, and I had to go from one audition. I was auditioning for Carrie, and I had to go from the Carrie audition at the studio to this hotel conference room up on the North Shore. It was a weird place for them to be doing an audition. It was a hard thing for me to get to. And again, I had my mom in tow. She's like visiting. And I'm like, okay, mom, you're gonna have to hold on, and I gotta go do this thing. And I remember running lines with her in the car, and then getting into the audition, doing it, and walking out knowing, I was like, I just knew I was going to book it. Like, I could tell from the way that the producer was reacting. I could tell just from just the look in the reader's eye and the casting director. Like, I knew I nailed it. So like everything about that, from audition to film day and beyond with the Golden Globes, movie star. There's a reason I retired very shortly after that, because there was like, I can't top this. How do you get better than this? I'm never, unless I win an Oscar. This is my pinnacle right here.
Speaking of job satisfaction, looking at it, do you feel that you can look back and say, I did everything that I wanted to do? Or do you wish that there could have been like an opportunity, or maybe theater or Broadway? I'm just thinking about all the different types of acting that you wish you could have gotten to do before transitioning to the next chapter.
Yeah, so I would have loved to have done a Broadway play. In fact, I'm helping produce a musical right now that I want to see on Broadway. I don't have the connections to get this piece to Broadway, but the show deserves a Broadway audience. It's called The Gardener. It's written by an unbelievably talented playwright, Marin Burnham. Professionally, she goes by Marin Ord. She actually wrote her when she was in her teens. She wrote a pop song that ended up being played on the TV show Felicity. Like that's this girl oozes talent, and just her musical gift is unbelievable. And she's written this play, like it makes me cry. I workshop it and I cry. I hear things about it, I cry. I hear the music. Like right now I'm looking for sponsorships for the workshop, the basically the regional staging of it that we're going to do. And so I'm like playing the music for potential investors into it, and in people who might want to get involved in promoting it. And every time I end up playing the music, I'm like, and this is where they see each other after years of being apart. I'm like sobbing like a baby every time I think of it. Like I'll be having a shower and the music will start playing in my head and I'll like tear up. It's awful. But she's just so talented and deserves to see Broadway. So I would have loved to have done a Broadway show. I also did a pilot for a TV show that, if it had got picked up, would have been like a 5-day a week gig doing this. It was like, you got to remember, this was like late 90s, and Pentium chips on computers had just come out. And so it was like a kid's tech show about like overclocking your processor and getting, do you or don't you get a video card? The answer now is obviously yes. But at the time, like the video card wasn't always necessarily a thing that got put in. So anyway, you'd review tech stuff and video games and all this stuff. And I did the pilot, and it was so much fun. And I wanted that gig so bad. And they ended up shopping it around and it got purchased. But the company that purchased it purchased the idea of the show, not the show itself. And so then
Oh.
it went on and got this other iteration. We originally called it Glitch, and I think it got renamed something and recast and shot out of a totally different city. I filmed it in Vancouver and ended up being shot out of Toronto. And so that was always one where I was like, I'd kind of like to have done, where I was the star, because I've done series regular things before where I had recurring roles on a couple of different shows. Jeremiah being one of them. An MTV project called Together was another one, but I never did. I never was like, I didn't have that series regular. People knew who I was, and so I would have. Those are, if I had any regrets, that would be it. But I also don't know that I would have had the talent to support it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a, it's a lot when you do that. And I know the auditions that I do. I know the roles that I land regularly. I kind of know where my niche is, and my niche is not a series regular. It is definitely a day player.
Does writing or being a part of this musical or this job that you have, does that take up a lot of your time now? Or do you able to spread it out and be able to do everything you want?
Oh yeah. No, it's producing this show is one step up from a volunteer position, because it's a regional theater production. And you know I have more expertise in the theater than Marin does, and so that makes me the executive producer. And I'm just lending some connections and some know-how to get it to at least be seen by bigger, better people than me,
Mhm.
so that it can start to gain the traction that it needs to be picked up by somebody else far more financially set off than me, far more connected than me, so that eventually this thing can hopefully find its way to New York, because the show, I'm telling you, it could win a Tony. It would win a Tony if people would just hear it and see it. Like, it is. I believe in this show in a way that I've been in theater now coming up 40 years, and I can honestly say it is the best musical I have ever seen or heard in my life. And I was in Ragtime when Ragtime didn't win the Tony, because, Disney put up a wow show with the Lion King. And I still, to this day, I still think Ragtime should have won, but that's neither here nor there. I've been in other musicals, classical musicals, like I was in staging of Carousel. I've done My Fair Lady, Music Man, some of these staple classics. I was in Chicago. Um, Unbelievable shows. This is the best musical I have ever heard, been involved with, known, and it needs to be known like those other ones that I've just name dropped, because they pale in comparison, and I recognize what that means when I say it. Even like Wicked has nothing on this. Book of Mormon, what do Trey Parker and Matt Stone even know about musicals? Nothing. No, Marin Ord is the name that you need to know, and The Gardener is the show you need to see.
During this time, did you ever have anything personal that came up that kind of possibly maybe affected your career or anything? Or were you able to kind of keep the two kind of lives separate, where your professional life didn't really interfere with your personal life, or anything in your personal life didn't interfere? Because we kind of talked about earlier where people in the industry, you never know which way it's going to go. But did
Yeah.
you have anything personally for you that kind of played an effect?
Well, sort of. So I got into film and television and theater initially. After my father passed away, it was kind of a way for me to um, process grief, especially because my dad passed away when I was 6. So, it's really too, you're too young at that point to really process what death means, the finality of it, uh, even to understand what mortality is. Like, it's a really abstract concept, even for us as adults, let alone 6 years old.
Mhm.
So that kind of kicked me off. But I do remember very clearly uh, running away from a lot of things when I was about 24, 25. I'd broken up with a long-term girlfriend, and she had a just an amazing son, and I'd kind of grown up watching him grow up. And so when we broke up, I was really only staying around in that relationship because I was absolutely in love with her son. Like, I just, that, and he's grown up to be an incredible human being too. Um, like little things too. Like, I was a goaltender, and so he watched me play goal, and then he became a goaltender after me and her had broken up. And I, like, secretly, I was like, how much influence did I have in that? Was that a me thing or a him thing? And, I kind of, like, on the peripheral, tried to pay attention to what he was doing. And he's just, I mean, he's grown up to be an incredible young man. And but when we broke up, I not only, like, I quit acting. I stopped living in the city. I moved provinces. Like, I moved halfway across the continent just to get away. Um, Really kind of changed who I was. It's weird because my wife met me just after that. Like, I basically tied up my little life in Vancouver as an actor and a performer in a bow, put it in a closet, labeled it "Do Not Open Until," and then I put it away, right? And moved to Toronto, and just completely and totally reinvented myself. You know, I started working for a national airline. First of all, I started working. I had never done that. I was work for somebody. I've always worked for myself. And so that was weird. You know, you have a job and punch in a unionized job, no less. And, you know, working with rough and tumble dudes as opposed to people who sing and dance. Like it was like complete 180, complete overhaul. Um, and so when my wife met me, she knew me as like a ramp rat from an airline. And it was like later on, you know, where she kind of like discovered this other side of me. And and she to this like it was for a real long time. We've been together now 16 years.
Wow.
And and she's like, no, 18 years. No, we've known each other 18 years. We've been together 16. And it was only in like the last like 2 or 3 years where she's really gotten to see the first time that she got to even see me perform or do anything. Was the first musical that I did for Marin, which is how I found out about her and her amazing talent. She'd written this, it's just like a kid show called Feather Pen Fairy Tales, but for just a kid show. Some of the best orchestration I've ever heard in my entire life. I had so much fun being in that show, and I got to play the villain because I always play the villain. And so, you know, Jen and my daughter got to come and see me on stage singing, dancing, acting. And I remember my mother-in-law coming and watching it. And afterwards, I love my mom. She's absolutely no filter. And she goes, I had no idea you could actually act. Thanks, Mom. She's like, and you sing really good too. Did you know you could sing? Like, no, this was a shock to us all. Don't you worry about that, Linda. Anyway, it entertained me. But my wife was like, you really enjoyed it. I'm like, you have no idea. This was my life for over 2 decades. And then, you know, to see my daughter get into it too, like that, I don't care if I ever act again. I don't actually care if she ever gets on a set again, but to watch her when she enjoys it. She, like I said, she filmed this commercial a month a bit ago. And we were just at her parent teacher conference. It's a student-led conference. So the teacher doesn't do anything. We come and my daughter, you know, shows us around and shows us all the things. We're reading through her journal. And she had, you know, the day her commercial came out, as today my commercial comes out, I'm so excited.
Wow.
You know, like things like that. I'm like, oh man, like I get it. I'm proud, you know. And because the last couple of times her commercials have come out, she's been too young to know or care.
Mm-hmm.
And then she took her hiatus. And so this is like, I think the first time where she's really been able to comprehend the fact that, hey, I'm going to be on TV, you know, and somebody's going to see me and I get to do this thing. So yeah, I'm excited for her.
Was it hard kind of keeping that other identity away from your wife at that time?
So the funny thing is, no, I wasn't trying to keep it away. Like it wasn't like it was this closeted secret, like, oh, just don't mention he's an actor. You know, like
Yeah.
it was just this side of me that you never saw. Like even though like I still had headshots and resumes and I have an IMDb, like if you Google me, it's the first thing that comes up. Or it was for a long while. Now it's my book, but that's neither here nor there. But you know, that used to be like when you Google, actually it's funny because my old roommate from Toronto is currently working with another dude named Tyler Foley. And she thinks it's hilarious because she texted me the other day. She's like, yeah, I'm working with this Tyler guy. I'm like, that's bizarre. And then they got into chatting about how she knew this other Tyler Foley. And he goes, you mean the actor guy? And she's like, you know him? He's like, no, it's just I Google my name and this dude shows up all the time. He's like the first like 30 pages. I've always wondered who he is. So I actually got to meet this other Tyler Foley through my old roommate and have a laugh. Theoretically, somehow we've got to be related because all Foleys in North America are related. But yeah.
I mean, it's just, you talked about like it wasn't a secret or anything. It's like I kind of view that for me, it's like, oh, he's a podcast host. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's not like I'm hiding it out there. It's everywhere on my social media. Maybe I just don't talk about it. Or
Yeah.
even the people on like I interview, they don't know that I actually have a real job where they think this is my job. But it's like that is nothing, like you don't want to hear me talk about that. But for you,
Yeah.
it's like it wasn't like you're hiding it. It's just it didn't come up at that time and you were in
Yeah.
a new chapter in your life. And if it did happen to come up, it happened.
Exactly. Yeah. And it wasn't, I don't walk around handing out business cards that say Tyler Foley, child star, like it's like, hey, I wasn't a child star, I was a child performer, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's not a thing that is prevalent for me. It's fun every once in a while. Like my wife's best friend and her maid of honor at our wedding, it is married to probably the world's largest cinephile, Pete, who is just a cool dude. And like he's like the exact opposite of me, because he's like, he goes to the gym, works out, he's got bad gains every day. And I will make fun of Pete all day long, because Pete will make fun of me all day long, because we are completely different people. Um, but he has this massive movie collection. In fact, uh, Amy, who's his wife, met him at Rogers Video, which is basically the Canadian equivalent of Blockbuster.
Okay.
And like he's all things movie. Like, he loves movies, particularly action films, because he's big. My favorite thing that I ever got to do, actually, one of the jobs that I have, is putting on large conferences, and one of the large conferences that I put on happened to have Arnold Schwarzenegger as the keynote speaker, and so I was able to get Pete not only front row seats, but front row seats right beside Arnold's family, and get him backstage passes to meet Arnold and get his picture taken with him. And I don't owe Pete a birthday or Christmas present for the next decade because of that. So that's super awesome. But he's just this massive movie buff. And every once in a while, because he'll watch a movie a night, sometimes two, because he watches them while he works out, and that's all he does. He texted me the other day. He's like, "Yeah, it's Halloween. I'm going through all the versions of Carrie. Nice acting." And he'll his because it's a line from Team America World Police. "Use your acting, Gary." And so he'll say that to me. He's like, "Use your acting, Tyler," or he'll be like, "You really used your acting there." And he thinks he's being clever and funny, and I'm like, "Dude, you don't even know what you're saying," but that's okay. And I love you. You know, I know when you say it, it's kind of like in The Princess Bride, when Wesley said, "As you wish," he really meant "I love you." I know what Pete means when he says, "Use your acting, Tyler."
As an author, why did you want to write?
Because my agent told me to.
Hey, I mean, that's a good answer, I will say.
Honest answer. I've actually been writing for a very long time. I think my first published work was a poem that I wrote when I was in like the fourth grade. I had a short story published in an anthology when I was in the sixth grade. I've always enjoyed writing, but I never thought of myself as an author. And literally, I wanted to get on bigger, larger stages, and my speaking agent said, you can't do some of these stages that you want to do if you don't have a book. I had a training course put together. I had all the things, but she's like, you need to have a book. And I went, okay, let's write a book. And literally, I started writing one on safety, because I have, when I'm not actor Tyler or speaker Tyler or author Tyler, I am safety professional Tyler. I run a safety consulting firm called Total Buy-In. And I'd originally written a book around safety, but I was like, there's so many books on this written by people who know so much more about this, that I don't even want to publish this thing. So it's a written manuscript. It's been published in that it's gone through Kindle, but it's not like professionally published by a traditional publisher. But when I wrote The Power to Speak Naked, it was literally prompted by a whole bunch of people saying, you need to do this thing, you want to get onto it. And it was actually a thing that I felt confident that I could write about. I mean, 37 years on stage, surely I know a thing or two about at least stage presence, you know?
Yeah.
Right. I've got at least that going for me, and the technicalities behind blocking and showing up and being able to speak a little bit more powerfully. So that was really the driving factor and the driving force behind writing the book. Was I wanted to be on bigger stages. My agent was telling me, you're not going to get the bigger stages if you don't have the book. A lot of the promoters that I know that I work very closely with, including the one that brought Arnold Schwarzenegger to Canada and that I got to help out my buddy with, all said, listen, we want to help you. Can't do it if you don't have a book. And I was like, well, if that's my only barrier to entry, I can crush out a book pretty darn quick. And that's what I did. I just, I literally spent a couple weeks, wasn't even months or anything, just a couple of weeks compiling old training videos that I had, putting together some other thoughts. The more fun process has been, now that the book has been published, I'm actually doing a revised version of it, because if you're not embarrassed about your first book, you published it too late. I read this and I go, ooh, oh, I'm glad that was a #1 bestseller. I would buy it. And so it's been fun. For the people who enjoy it, they really do enjoy it, but there's more that I could add to it. And I've always felt that it was incomplete. And so to be able to get to go back and tweak it and revise it, that's been fun, but that's actually been a harder process than the initial writing of the first manuscript.
We've talked about professional Tyler throughout this interview, but now let's get into personal Tyler. Is there anything you want to accomplish personally that is on the traditional way is saying bucket list, but sometimes people have goals that they want to accomplish, but personally, not a professional goal?
Yeah, I want to get my private pilot's license. It's a thing that I've wanted to do since I was like 12, even before that, I remember I almost joined Air Cadets, because you could get your private license before you were 18 if you joined Air Cadets. But then I realized that it was a military organization. I was like, I don't military.
Yeah.
So, I support troops. I'm incredibly grateful for their service, because it's something I'm not willing to do. So I recognize just how hard of a sacrifice that is. And so I was like, I'm not going to join the cadets. I don't want to have to polish boots just to be able to fly. And so it's been a thing that always got pushed off. And then, like, when I ran my first company, InView Solutions, we had 3 planes and I had access to pilots, and we ran it out of a regional airport that had a flight school right below us. Like, I could literally walk down the stairs to the flight school. And I kept saying, oh, when things slow down a little bit and we make a little bit more money, I'm going to go and get my pilot's license. And then that business collapsed. I never did make more money with it.
Oh.
Now I don't work conveniently right by an airport. And so I didn't get it. Like, when I was working for the airline, I wanted to get it. And I had a buddy who was a pilot. And I actually have a few friends who are not only trained pilots, but trained instructors, who have always said, if you want to do it, let's get involved. One of my best friends, Chris Baisley, could teach me. Another friend of mine, Eric Fussell, could teach me. Like, there's so many people who I have available to me. I have the access and the resources. I just haven't done it. And so that's a thing that I definitely want to remedy sooner rather than later. And the other one is I want to get certified for deep dives, because I'm fascinated by marine life, and I would really, really, really like to be able to do something more than just recreational diving in Cancun on my vacation.
See, I'm telling you, when I do these interviews and you look at what you thought about when you're growing up to what you are at now, it all circles back to each other.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about the marine life. We made the joke earlier about the title. So if we talk in the next few years, I need to hopefully have pilot under a new title of yours. So that's going to be my expectations next time we talk, is pilot is going to be added to the list. I like actually, there was an airport nearby. My grandmother got me like a certificate for a free lesson. And I did that, and it was so much fun. But then just hearing like the criteria of how many hours you have to get, how often, And I'm like, this is like a full-time course or like a
Yeah.
full-time job just to do it. And I kind of just lost interest. But then I look at photos and I'm like, I wish I did that more. But when you said the deep sea thing, that is more me. I'm a water guy. I live in the Midwest, so it
Yeah.
takes me hours just to get to an ocean. But that would be so much fun because I watch all those TV shows where it's like about water and stuff. And I'm like, I want to do that. Where do I
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I watch these shows, one of my favorite shows to watch, probably my biggest addiction is Curse of Oak Island. Because I've grown up knowing the story. My father was from Nova Scotia. I've known about Oak Island basically all of my life. I'm fascinated with the idea of hidden treasure for one, like pirate treasure, or like hidden mysteries and secrets. Like, yeah, sign me up. As much fun as I have, like I even know the guys who did the seismic survey. Like I know the guys from Eagle Surveys who actually did the seismic survey of that island because they're from Calgary. And but I watch um the divers go down, and most people would be like, I'm never going to do that. You stick me into a 6 foot or 8 foot caisson and on a bosun chair and like zero visibility, not for me. And I'm going, that's so cool. I want to do that so bad. And then my wife started watching this other show about these guys who do deep sea salvage, but like not cool salvage, like not like sunken pirate ships, like, marine vessel goes down and you have to get like ore out of it. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I would love that. Just the technicality of it would fascinate me. I love the feeling of weightlessness. Again, I love being in and around the ocean. The funny thing is that I'm an absolute wimp when it comes to cold water. Hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. To the point where I actually have started doing cold showers because when my daughter was 4, we went out to one of my favorite lakes in the mountains, the middle of the interior of British Columbia, and it's actually a warmer lake. It's called Skaha Lake. And all she wanted to do was play with me. And I was like, Daddy doesn't do cold water. And I remember seeing a whole bunch of pictures of my wife and her playing, and just the smile on her face, just the pure joy and the innocence of it. And me feeling that I completely and totally missed out on the experience because I was afraid of cold water. So literally that was the beginning of July, and both of our birthdays, my daughter's and mine's the end of July. And on my birthday, I kind of made a commitment to myself that I was going to take a cold shower every day. And I've been doing that now for 3 years, just so that I can be like, no, cold water will not stop me from doing things. And that's the thing. Like I love to dive, but I dive like tropics. Like the guys laugh at me when I go to like, Bahamas. And I'm like, do you got a dry suit? I won't dive in a wetsuit. And it could be like, the warmest water on the planet. And I'm like, yeah, dry suit me, please. It's just dumb.
The final question I'll ask you for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
Probably that we drastically overestimate what we can do in a day or a week, and tremendously underestimate what we can do in a year or 5 or 10. And every challenge has a solution. Doesn't matter how big or small, but a lot of times it takes a lot of perseverance to get there,
Yep.
you know? And I think of Sir Hilary Edmond, theoretically the first human to scale Mount Everest, stand and summit it, stand at the top. He's just the first one that's documented. You know, there's slowly more and more evidence that, human beings have been doing that trek for millennia. And the Sherpas, particularly from Nepal, they know how to get there, So there's somebody that was helping them. So nothing is insurmountable, and if you don't know how to do it yourself, very much like having a Sherpa to get you to the top, relying on the expertise of people who have been there before, somebody has solved it. Somebody has done the thing that you want to do.
Yep.
And, you'd be surprised at how willing human beings are to help you do the thing you want to do if you just ask. One of the, it becomes a sense of joy and pride. So I guess it's multifold advice. Find somebody who can support you, who can mentor you, who can tutor you, who can teach you. Don't try to learn it all at once. If I want to get my pilot's license, and I do, I'm not going to get it overnight. As you pointed out, like I need 100 hours, and then I need 1,500 hours, and then like it takes time. That's not going to come overnight. But the more I chip away at it, I even like this is totally dumb. I'm doing this, learning French again. As a Canadian, theoretically, we speak 2 languages, and I speak one poorly. So, I'm trying to learn French, particularly because my daughter is now going through school. She's learning French. My wife and I want to be able to really help and support her with it. And the app that I'm using challenges you to get like 10,000 points using this one particular type of thing. You can only get up to 40 points doing it. And I'm like, ugh, you know how long it takes to do that? Like, because I can do the math in my head. Like, I know just how many times I have to do this thing. But I started to say to myself, well, do 2 a day. It's only 80 points. It's 2 a day. But I do 2 a day and I get those 80 points. Even if I only do it 5 days a week, it's 400 points. And if I do that for 10 weeks, that's 4,000 points. Now I'm almost halfway there, and it's only 10 weeks, right? The 10,000 looks insurmountable. I don't even want to try. But if I challenge myself to just do 2 a day, 25 weeks down the road, I'm done. That's not half a year. And it's breaking them down into those micro chunks, I think is the quickest and fastest way to be able to tackle any challenge and rise to it.
Well, Tyler, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we're excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. It was my joy being here.